So, this happened a year ago, and I'm still pretty shaken by the whole event. I thought I'd tell my story. I live in the UK, and in autumn, it gets dark around 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home, so that means my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her for over a year at that point, so her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going out across the country for the day, so she had to look after her brother. But I thought I'd give her the day to herself, so she can just cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they agreed. So I came around 8 a.m., and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together, and went back to her house when we were done, and once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there at about 2 p.m., and the place was pretty packed. Eventually, though, the sun started going down, and the place was completely empty by 4 p.m. I texted my girlfriend and told her we'd be home in a bit, and she said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having so much fun being the only two at the park. We stood on top of this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded, oops, coming home now, and told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slide one more time, and I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were street lights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and places for the kids to play. When I came out of the slide, though, there was something weird. A man had approached out of nowhere and was stood beneath one of the street lights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, hi there. I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open, drooling, with a blank look in his eyes. This man made me feel really fucking uneasy. I picked up little bro and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit to my left that led to the path back home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy was still stood there. The path where the guy was standing merges with a big main path if you walk out through some bushes, and so does the one I walked through. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He was standing beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer, and I realized it was a fucking knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. Girlfriend's little brother was so scared, he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the guy seemed to be moving to new streetlights whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me, but I started counting them, and realized 2 streetlights behind him had definitely turned into 5. I could still faintly hear the groaning noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace a bit and turned a corner, getting into the last stretch of street before I got to my girlfriend's house. That was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. That moaning noise sounded angry. I then heard his heavy footsteps bounding down the path. The man was fucking running. I immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There was a big bush there, so I crouched down behind that and spammed her phone with messages to open the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. It felt like years. I went to the front of the house and had it confirmed that I'd managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I'd been, outside of the alleyway just moments ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hand still, too. He started kicking people's bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived, and as far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago, I saw in a local Facebook group, but I don't think anything came of that either. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe, and didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much the day afterwards, but he still has nightmares about that event. When my country isn't in lockdown, I'm still allowed to look after him with my girlfriend, funnily enough. But we haven't been to that park ever since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone in the street. I spent a number of years performing on the Renaissance Fair circuit. I traveled across the country, directing troops, performing as a swordsman, and breathing fire. Most times I'd live in a tent, in a small tent city on the fair site. Sometimes, if I was lucky, there would be some place I could crash, like a booth or even inside a stage. I was at the Ohio Renaissance Fair, and I'd managed to get the key to the Gloriana stage's door. It was perfect. The back door padlocked from the outside, but the stage door and windows locked from the inside. I'd just leave a window unlocked so I could come and go, and if somebody locked the window, I could still get in. So the place was nice and secure at night, and that was a real plus. Even better was that it was a 2-story structure, and there was even a hammock upstairs. Since I performed on the stage during the day, my moving a few things into the backstage area wasn't viewed askance by my fellow performers. I had my sleeping bag, a blanket, and my US mail bag that I carried my clothes in, and which doubled as my pillow. I figured I was good to go for the entire season. I spent a good portion of the evenings up top of the stage, smoking cigarettes and looking out over the fair site. The view behind the stage was just overgrown with trees and thick bushes. It came up to 8 to 10 feet from the stage door, so it was a bit claustrophobic back there, but looking out over the stage was really nice at night. I spent quite a few nights up there, enjoying the view, smoking, and just being at peace, until the night of the creepy. It was a clear night, and I'd been drinking with the jousters before making my way back to Gloriana. As I was walking through behind the stage, I heard something rustling in the bush behind me. It unnerved me quite a bit, so I hurriedly moved around to the front of the stage, opened up the window, crawled in, and locked things up tight. With my flashlight, I checked things out to make sure nothing had been disturbed, but everything looked like I had left it, or at least it hadn't been disturbed enough for me to notice. Locked in and secure, I climbed up the ladder and onto the stage's upper balcony. There wasn't much of a moon that night, and so it was kind of dark. It was a pretty chilly autumn night, so I wasn't planning on staying out too long, but I enjoyed looking out over my kingdom, looking at the lights and listening to the distant laughter from other wrenfolk. The only other sound was the common night sounds, crickets and other things that buzzed and whirred in the dark. I was on my second smoke, a Clove Samborna 234. Those things can be smoked for 30 minutes or so, and so I'd savor one of those things over a few nights. I'd just taken my second or third drag, and everything in the woods behind me went really quiet. Even buzzed like I was, I noticed that. Now, here's the point where I tell you that my first name is Bob. Growing up, I was called Bobby, and as I grew into adulthood, I dropped the childish second syllable and really came to hate it. From back in the undergrowth somewhere, I heard something, and at first I thought it was a bullfrog. It was this deep croaking sound, coming from fairly close to the stage's small backyard. I smoked a little bit longer, but something was really nagging at the back of my mind, and I was getting tense. So I snuffed the clove out and turned to look over the back. The rest of the night sounds were still silent, only that croaking and an occasional rustling in the bushes. I stood there, listening a bit longer before I realized that I wasn't hearing a bullfrog. I was hearing a human voice. If you've ever made that croaking frog sound as a kid, the one where you rasp out the word ribbit while slowly inhaling so it sort of breaks up and pops, that was what I was hearing. Worse, the voice was croaking, Bobby. Well, I was sober as a fucking judge in a matter of seconds. I ducked inside and grabbed my flashlight, one of those really heavy mag lights that can double as a billy club, at least if you don't care about it working as a flashlight after, and started shining it around the back. I couldn't see anyone out there, but while I was looking for the source of the voice, a second voice joined in, and then a third. "Who's there?" I shouted. Not exactly original, but it was pretty germane to my thoughts at the moment. Nothing. Just 3 voices croaking out my name. I got that cold, creeped-out feeling up and down my spine, ducked inside and went downstairs. Now, we Rennies generally had a knife of some sort. Mine was a simple dagger with a 5-inch blade. It was cheap pot metal and didn't really keep an edge, but it was good enough to eat with during the fair day. You also sure wouldn't want to be stabbed with it. That said, having a knife and a flashlight didn't fill me with a whole lot of confidence, and I sure as hell didn't plan on running out into the back to see who was there. Then the scratching started. While the croaking voices continued calling my name, I heard the sound of fingernails dragging up and down the back door of the stage. Sure, it was padlocked, but it wasn't like I was the only person with a key either. That was enough for me. I slowly slid back the hatch on one of the stage windows and quietly swung it open. I crept out onto the stage, still hearing the croaking and scratching behind me. I'm not proud. I ran like hell. I jogged across the fair side and back to Jouster World, aloft above one of the site's barns. Come morning, I went back to the stage and found all of the windows open, and the back door was unlocked and hanging open as well. Someone had gone through all of my stuff and had thrown it all over the backstage area, inside and out. I stayed with the Jousters for the next 2 weeks before going on the road and heading down to the Texas Renaissance Fair. To this day, I still have no idea who was out there, and so, in my mind, they were just the creepy. This happened to me when I was about 15 or 16. I had forgotten about this for ages, so despite being a lurker on this subreddit, I never thought to post it. A few months ago, I told a few people about it though, and their reactions made me realize it's probably worth throwing on here, because it really defies explanation, and I really am curious what others would think of it. So, years and years back when I was in high school, I had a few friends crashing at my place on the weekend. We were drinking a bit, watching horror movies, nothing too interesting. Later on, we were polishing off whatever we had on us and sitting in my room in the dark, which was actually the den in the basement. My room sat at the back of the house, and the hallway led more or less straight into 2 other rooms that faced the front. Around 3 a.m. or so, we're just shooting the shit when one of us suddenly notices a bright white light just barely washing into the room, kind of spilling across the floor and highlighting all the dust dancing around in the air. It's a very bright, artificial-looking light. Think the cheesy effects whenever the alien shows up on the X-Files. Curious about what was causing this, being the guy closest to the door, I sat up and walked into the hallway to investigate. As I entered the very short hallway leading into the front basement rooms, the light was already much brighter. I noticed that it was coming from the room on the left, which didn't have blinds yet, and so the basement window faced boldly onto the street, unobscured. I walked forward and stepped into the room, and immediately froze in my tracks. Parked on the street, and pointed straight at my house, was a huge big rig kind of truck, minus the trailer. The high beams were on and filling the air, not to mention my house, with an eerie white light. To this day, I've never seen a space so lit up in the middle of the night. What really got me, though, was the 2 individuals standing directly in front of the truck, right at the edge of my lawn, staring at my house. He was a very typical trucker-looking type in a ball cap, broad-shouldered husky guy, mangy clothes from what little I could see. Beside him stood some girl that looked like a teenager from her build. All I could really make out was her scraggly hair. People say this a lot on Let's Not Meet, but I really did just intuit that something was off about these 2 right away, before I really had a reason to know that. What really got me was those fucking high beams. They stood in front of the truck, so although a very bright light was at their back, I couldn't make out one single detail about their faces. It freaked me the fuck out. It just looked wrong. This is where the normally logical me would think they were lost, or any of a million normal things really, but that's when I really picked up on what was so off about them. They were standing completely motionless, hands at their sides, no signs that they were talking to each other, no little shifts of body language, not even moving their weight from one foot to the other, as any normal person would while standing still for long periods. They just fucking stood there, staring straight ahead, at my house, at me. This is around where I got the fuck out of that room and shut the door. I got my friends to come upstairs with me so we could scope these 2 out from above. It was one of those split-level kind of houses. We looked down at them through the curtain, and sure enough, they hadn't budged. Truck still aimed straight at my house, high beams still bursting through the windows, 2 weirdos still standing completely still right in front of it. After considering many options, some smart, calling the police, and some completely stupid, confrontation, we opted to double-check that my door was locked and get some sleep. Since there was a few of us, we could have someone keeping an eye on them while the others slept. I remember thinking it felt like keeping watch in the Vietnam War or something, or anyway, that's what I thought. But when it was my turn to keep watch, they were gone. Apparently they just stood there, outside in the autumn for hours, and then went on their merry way. That's totally normal, right? What the actual fuck? I'll be right back, don't move. My mom instructed us as she got out of the car and locked the doors. Now, before anybody freaks out, my mom was just running into the post office in the middle of autumn, so my brothers and I were not in danger of dying in a locked car. We were also old enough to unlock the doors and open them if we needed fresh air. At around 6 years old, I was just learning to read and write, so my parents had bought me one of those diaries with all the stickers that I could decorate after writing who my latest crush in school was. Pen in hand, I was writing down something about my day, listening to my older and younger brother talk while we waited for my mom to buy a few stamps to mail some letters. I was focusing on my handwriting when I heard a knock at the window of our minivan and looked up. At 19 years old, I can still vividly see the face of the man who had made the noise. There was something off about this man, and I knew it the moment I saw his face. He had unkempt, shaggy brown hair and oversized aviators disguising most of his face. He was frantically knocking on the car window. He kept pointing down at the lock button and motioning for me to pull it up. I was terrified, and it seemed as if he was trying to coax me to open the door for a year before I heard a woman screaming and saw his face turn from a faux smile to sheer panic. My mother ran out of the post office screaming, telling him to get the hell away from her car. He stood there, and after composing himself, told her he just wanted to make sure that they were all okay in the car. The line at the post office had been longer than usual, and my mom turned around to see the car from the big windows and saw a man hunched over trying to get our attention and ran out immediately. After telling him that they were fine and thanking him in a very sarcastic manner, she got into the car and we drove away without getting her stamps. She was trying to ask us what had happened, and my brothers and I were all talking at once when she looked in the rearview mirror and noticed that the man was following us in his car. "We're not going home," my mother said, fear in her voice. My brothers and I didn't realize the danger we were in. "Why?" we kept asking, and she just kept telling us to be quiet, checking behind the car every so often to see if the man was still there. He was. We pulled into our neighborhood, which was fairly big and comprised of many circles, and every route my mom took, the man followed. If he had just been trying to get our license plate to report my mom to the police for keeping us in the car, he would have had the chance to get it and go. My mom pulled into a driveway that wasn't our own, and after stopping for a moment, the man drove away. After my mom was sure he was gone, we continued home and pulled into the garage, which was rare for her at the time. We usually just parked on the driveway, and got us all into the house safely. From that day on, I've had so many nightmares about getting kidnapped. Whenever my mom left my brothers and I in the car, we would have a code word, chicken, that if anybody was approaching our vehicle, we would quickly duck and hide under the seats and lock all of the doors if they weren't already. It's been about 11 years since I moved away by now. I wanted to study abroad, so at the age of 19, I left. Since then, I haven't spoke much with my parents. We weren't on bad terms or anything. I suppose that we just naturally stopped communicating all that much. A couple of weeks ago, though, my father passed away from a stroke. As mentioned, we weren't close anymore, but I still loved him very dearly, so of course I came back to town for the funeral. It was a nice funeral, nothing fancy. He wouldn't have wanted anything fancy anyway. My mother and I agreed that it would be good for me to stay over the weekend, so I did. It was the 11th of October when we held the funeral, so when we got back to my parents' home, I jokingly told my mother, "Guess we'll have to stay indoors tomorrow night, huh?" My mother looked confused at me. "What are you talking about?" she said. "Why would we have to stay indoors tomorrow night?" She asked me as if I had just said something completely nonsensical. "You know, because of the brothers. Tomorrow's the 12th. She looked even more confused. "What do you mean? Who are the brothers?" At first, I thought she was playing some sort of prank on me. I mean, it was a pretty big thing. Every year, on the 12th of October, the brothers would arrive in town. They didn't come from anywhere else as far as I was aware. They just appeared. I asked my parents once, but they didn't seem to know where the brothers came from. My teachers didn't either. No one knew. It wasn't something that anyone considered strange. It was just accepted that the brothers didn't come from a specific place. The brothers themselves had very distinct attire. They both wore the exact same thing, a black suit with a white button-up shirt underneath, and a standard gray tie. They'd always wear this pitch-black, broad-brim fedora as well. Along with the suits and hats, they'd both be carrying a large black briefcase, always in their right hand. Dressed like this, they'd move down the streets of town, side by side, without ever lifting a foot from the ground. Their faces were identical, but hard to describe. So hard, in fact, that it was a running joke amongst the townsfolk to argue about their features. Some proclaimed that they looked old and had saggy faces, while others said that they looked like two businessmen in their 20s. Most of us never really got a good look at them, and it was clear, even from a distance, that they looked the exact same. I suppose that, to us, they had a similar role as that of Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy, these sort of mythological beings that had just always been around. We'd play games, attempting to guess what was in their suitcases, and what their names were. They had roamed the streets of the city every October for as long as anyone in town could remember, and there were some pretty old folks in town. It wasn't weird. We never considered it weird. Of course, as kids didn't really know anyone outside of our small town, so we had no idea that the brothers weren't actually a countrywide phenomenon. One thing that separated the brothers from Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, however, was the fact that when they came, we were not allowed to step outside our house. It was an actual law in the city. Anyone who were to step outside their homes between the hours of 6 p.m. on the 12th of October and 3 a.m. on the 13th of October were to receive a fine of $200. No one ever got fined because no one ever went outside during that time. If someone did go outside, there would be no one outside to see them anyway. No one except the brothers. Every year, on the first Monday of October, there'd be a 1-hour period at school in which we would all go over the brothers with our history teacher. We would go over when they would appear, when they would disappear, and how to avoid them if we hadn't made it home by the time they arrived. I remember one year, one of the younger kids raised their hand, asking what would happen if we didn't manage to avoid them. The teacher gave some sort of vague response. I can't remember it exactly. I wasn't paying much attention, as I had heard the rules year after year. I remember it being strange though, ominous. None of us ever failed to make it home on time, not even the oldest, more rebellious kids. Even though we didn't know exactly what would happen, we all knew that it wasn't worth it to find out. After all, none of us doubted the existence of the brothers. We had all seen them. They always made their way down every street, slowly moving through the town, never lifting a foot from the ground. I was up all night the day after my father's funeral. I stayed inside, waiting for the brothers to pass by the house, as they had always done. They never came. The following day, I asked around. Old neighbors, friends from school, my old history teacher. I even went to the station to ask the policeman about the law, the one that prohibited a person from leaving their home when the brothers were active. They all just laughed it off. I know that this was a thing. I know that it was real. I remember me and my best friend dressing up as the brothers for Halloween in 6th grade, for Christ's sake. I know that they were here. I've seen them dozens of times. Why doesn't anyone remember? I'm going to send this story to all the news agencies that will take it. If there's anyone out there reading this that remembers the brothers, slowly gliding down the dark streets in the cold autumn evenings of the 12th of October each year, please contact me. I remember them. I remember the brothers.